when an empire is decline, you always have different factions competing against each other for power, right? And so there's the historian Peter Turchin. He writes about this and he calls it the elite overproduction. In that over time, what causes an empire to decline is that you have too many elite. And the elite are essentially parasites, right? And you become a parasite if you're able to monopolize political power.
We can still have gold reserves, and we can have dollar reserves, and pound sterling are both equal to gold in reserves. And that started this whole currency as reserves double counting fraud, essentially. But so people are like, oh, we've got to have something to replace it. No, we don't. We just got to go back to 1921, and where gold's the only reserve. And I think that's where we're going.
History shows major empires often decline due to internal splits and elite competition. As empires grow, their systems become more complex, and power becomes more concentrated, weakening stability. This puts pressure on money systems, especially when trust fades. Often, societies then shift to simpler, widely trusted forms of value. Jiang Xueqin, known for his geopolitical perspective, and Luke Gromen, who focuses on monetary system transitions, highlight that the current system of reserve currencies has drifted far from its original foundation. With fiat currencies effectively layered on top of gold reserves, the system has evolved into a complex structure in which multiple claims to the underlying value coexist. Historically, systems like the gold standard provided a simpler framework, anchoring currencies directly to gold and limiting excessive expansion. Building on this, the perspective suggests that the future may involve a return to more disciplined monetary arrangements. As trust in layered reserve systems weakens, gold could re-emerge as a primary anchor, reshaping global finance and redefining the role of currencies. Now, we present the clips from their interview. Before we continue to discuss this, please subscribe to our channel and activate the bell icon for timely updates. Thank you, and enjoy the video.
When an empire is decline, you always have different factions competing against each other for power, right? And so there's the historian Peter Turchin. He writes about this and he calls it the elite overproduction. In that over time, what causes an empire to decline is that you have too many elite. And the elite are essentially parasites, right? And you become a parasite if you're able to monopolize political power. So think about the 2008 great financial crisis, where it was clearly Wall Street who caused the crisis through criminal activity. And not only did the government not punish them, but the government actually bailed them out and made them even more powerful in Washington, D.C., right? So that's the idea of elite power, where you can control the apparatus of political power in order to obtain rents, in order to engage in rent-seeking behavior. The problem, though, is that now you have emerging elites to challenge the financial oligarchy. For example, Silicon Valley, artificial intelligence, these people, right? Including Christian nationalists, including other different factions as well, America, MAGA, right? And so what we're seeing right now is a clash of these different political factions. And maybe before 100 years ago, I would have said that eventually one of these factions would emerge as the synthesis, right? And so looking back, we could say, well, clearly this was orchestrated, even though it was organic. But I think we've reached a point in human development where we are so overextended, where the balance is so unsustainable that it's going to be a free fall. Meaning, like, it's going to be a civil war and it's not going to stop until everything is destroyed. So think of the Bronze Age collapse. In about the year about 1000 BCE. But also think of the fall of the Roman Republic, where once the Roman Republic started to fall, it never really stopped falling. Yes, I understand that there were these emperors who came into power, but their reigns didn't last very long, maybe 20 years at most. So America is going to head towards this direction where America is so overextended in terms of like debt, in terms of political polarization, in terms of like elite overproduction, that you might have like decades of civil war between different factions. Now, it's possible these different factions will change over time, but we can expect that once civil war starts, it never really stops. This plan was developed in the 1930s, and this called for America to transition from a democracy, which caused things like, you know, the stock market crash and the Great Depression, to a technocracy, which is a system run by technocrats using data and statistics in order to make the best informed decisions, basically engineers. So Trump is consistent in that he's very anti-globalist. He thinks that organizations like the United Nations, the WTO exists in order to pilfer from American people. So what Trump wants to do is recenter America from a focus on finance to a focus on resources and manufacturing, right? And he's been trying to do that starting in his first term, and he tried to do that by imposing tariffs, by starting this trade war with China, and there were a lot of issues with this. So now his main plan is to start a global conflict that would force America to reindustrialize in order to fight these wars overseas. And with all these wars overseas, the world will be dependent on America for its resources, which will motivate these companies to go and extract resources from Venezuela, right? So in January, after Trump kidnapped Maduro, he convened a meeting of oil executives with Chevron, ExxonMobil, and basically Trump's like, Venezuela is ours for the taking. And the oil executives rebuffed him and said, no, well, we would have spent 5 years and $20 billion in order to develop the Venezuelan industry. So we don't really see what the benefit is for us. Well, if the entire world it lacks oil because the GCC has been destroyed, if the Strait of Hormuz is still closed, then they would be financially incentivized to go and start to develop Venezuela's oil industry. So I think this is very much part of Trump's vision that America will become the resource and manufacturing hub of the world while the world is in flames because of these wars that America has started. There will be a lot of opposition towards Trump's plan, mainly from the globalists, right? When I mean globalists, I mean City of London, Wall Street, who control the EU, who control NATO. This is still a very powerful force in the world. They still control the deep state in America. So if Trump moves ahead with his plan, then we can expect economic sabotage in America, where the globalists are going to intentionally destroy the American economy, cause a crash in the American economy, and then maybe organize protests, anti-war protests, which would possibly lead to a civil war. So I think that right now Trump is trying to move towards a natural draft, and we can expect that if that were the case, then these billionaires, these oligarchs, would happily fund national protests against the natural draft because they see that as possibly a pressure point on Trump's plan.
Periods of imperial decline are often marked by internal fragmentation, where competing elite groups struggle for control over political and economic systems. This dynamic, sometimes described as elite overproduction, creates instability as more factions seek influence than the system can sustain. The result is rising polarization, weakened institutions, and an increasing risk of prolonged conflict rather than an orderly transition. Today, we can see similar splits between financial leaders, tech elites, and political groups. Each wants a different future for society and the economy. In history, these tensions often led to prolonged periods of trouble, such as the fall of ancient civilizations. High debt, imbalances in money supply, and power struggles add to these risks. In this environment, structural change tends to occur through cycles of conflict, economic restructuring, and shifts in resource control. The outcome is rarely immediate. It often unfolds over years or decades as systems adjust under pressure. Let's get back to the interview.
Ships that are pricing in yuan or transacting in yuan are coming and going, right? I thought it was an underreported or underappreciated dynamic when you were hearing about these other nations' ships identifying as Chinese to get through safely. When was the last time we heard that? Like, as an American, I just kind of look at that and go, wow. Right? Like, that's really interesting. And I think ultimately what you're going to go to is, like, the dollar's fine for transacting in, right? It's sort of like, if you're at Chuck E. Cheese, I use Chuck E. Cheese tokens to go play skee ball. And, I play skee ball and I win a bunch of tickets. I take them over and I get, a prize at the counter and I walk out of there with the prize. And so, like, people are so focused on the Chuck E. Cheese token when it's really the prize that you're after, right? The token is just the way of the prize, token, ticket, prize. We can go to multi-currency energy pricing, right? Pricing in yuan. Chinese are not going to open their capital account on a full basis, but their capital account is open through gold. on a limited basis. And the Chinese are happy to transact in yuan for Chinese goods, right? So, everyone's like, oh, they're overproducing electric cars and they're overproducing everything. Well, not anymore, are they? BYD, they're flying off shelves, all done in yuan. I'm sure, right? So I think the system we're going to go to is the system that you back into that will be dictated by the factory power, right? The producing power, the factory power of the world is China, not the United States. And that's been true for at least 10 years and maybe longer. And the way that system looks is, hey, transact in whatever currency you want to transact in and settle in gold. You're seeing that gold already overtake dollars in global FX reserves. And I think it's only a matter of time. Do you see it start overtaking it in more collateral markets? You're seeing some innovative products, like ABAX in Singapore, where they're effectively using gold collateral for sort of immediate settlement for energy and other commodities. So I think that's where we're going, which is effectively, use whatever Chuck E. Cheese token to buy that you want and settle any net surpluses in gold. You're going to basically be cramming commodity markets into the gold market, and the commodity markets are still 12, 15 times bigger than the gold market. So the dollar's not going to be replaced by anything. It's going to be replaced by this multi-currency payment gold settlement system, which is kind of going back to the future, by the way, right? Like Putin and Xi in 2023 were caught on a live mic saying we're making changes to the system that haven't happened in 100 years. We'll go back 100 years. It was Genoa Conference 1922. That's what Jacques Rueff called the original monetary sin of the West. That's where the US and UK said, back up before then, the only thing in reserves was gold. And that's when the US and UK said, well, we can still have gold reserves and we can have dollar reserves, and pound sterling are both equal to gold in reserves. And that started this whole currency as reserves double counting fraud, essentially. But so people are like, oh, we've got to have something to replace it. No, we don't. We just got to go back to 1921 and where gold's the only reserve. And I think that's where we're going. I think it's important to understand the nature of the old system and the nature of the new system and the goals of the United States. And what I mean by that is, look, is that durable? In my opinion, yes, very highly likely. Now, there's a view out there that what the United States is doing in Iran is trying to, in the aftermath of Venezuela, we're going to grab Venezuela, we're going to grab Iran, we're going to control, as Lindsey Graham said, 31% of the world's oil, plus ours. We're going to shore up the petrodollar system. Okay. And what that means is the United States has to hollow out its defense industrial base. That's what the petrodollar did. People are like, well, we're going to shore up the petrodollar system. Okay, great. Petrodollar system 73 to 22. What happened to U.S. industrial base? Gone. Sitting in China now. And so there's this cognitive dissonance in people making this argument about controlling oil. You're going to control oil. You're not going to have an industrial base, to support the dollar. You're not going to have an industrial base, which means China's going to make the entirety of your military for you in 5 to 10 years. And that's why I say it's probably and highly likely durable. If the United States government decides it is in its interest to have China make all of its military for it, then let's go, use the military we have left before China makes it all and seize Iran and take God knows how many losses and spend God knows how much money, maybe doing it. And let's grab Venezuela and let's price oil only in dollars. And then we can use our Chinese-made military to force China to buy oil only in dollars. Hoorah. And you kind of quickly go, doesn't make sense. And so as long as that doesn't make sense, as long as it's in the United States' interest to not have a foreign country make its entire military for it, then I think gold has surpassed treasuries in FX reserves for good. Because Grant's right, it's mostly price driven. And that's the whole friggin' point, right? Like you don't hear people say, well, yeah, but gold's surpassed treasuries, but it's mostly price driven. And I go, shares outstanding in the S&P haven't really changed over the last 30 years. It's mostly price driven. They look at you like, what are you, stupid? And so but it's this, they then turn around and make the argument, well, yeah, gold's not really replacing treasuries that much, just price. Like price is the whole point. Gold is going up in price because the Americans are inflating, other central banks are inflating to try to keep their sovereign debt sustainable, which makes sovereign debt unattractive. That's the whole point. So between this dynamic of, I framed it earlier this year as the scene from The Notebook, right, with Rachel McAdams and Ryan Gosling. What do you want? What do you want? If you want China to not build your military for you in 5 years, the entirety of it, rather than just a bunch of it now, then gold has to be bigger than treasuries. That's the only way it works. Because if we go back to a petrodollar system, we go back, you can't do both, because otherwise we're not generating the dollars to supply the dollars for the world economy collapses. That's the deal. Petrodollar deal is we generate the surplus or the deficits, and those deficits hollow out our industrial base to supply the dollars for the world. That's not in our interest anymore. So as long as that's not in our interest anymore, gold, I think, is going to keep gaining in volume and price versus treasuries in global reserves. I think that's a done deal.
The world's money system seems to be moving to a more divided but organized setup. Many currencies may be used for trade, while settlements turn to neutral assets. More countries use different currencies for trade, especially in energy, hinting at less focus on a single main reserve. This is not about replacing the dollar right away, but slowly relying on it less. Gold is becoming more important during this shift. As government debt rises and currencies lose value, gold matters more for settling payments. Using gold as backup and for final deals shows a trend toward trust in solid value, not just in more financial claims. This dynamic also aligns with structural changes in global production, where manufacturing power and control over resources are influencing monetary arrangements. The outcome is likely a hybrid system, multi-currency for transactions, with gold acting as the ultimate balancing mechanism. Share your thoughts on their analysis in the comment section below. If you find this video informative, please support and turn on notifications to stay informed about our latest videos. See you in the following video. Thanks for watching.